What if I told you that the most productive food plants on Earth are not apple trees, not pear trees, not the fruit orchard that takes up half your yard and produces a meaningful harvest once a year? The plants that serious food growers quietly rely on are small enough to grow in a container on a porch, compact enough to fit in a raised bed, productive enough to absolutely bury a full-size fruit tree in yield per square foot, per dollar spent, per hour of work invested. Most people spend years nurturing a fruit tree, waiting for it to mature, managing pests, dealing with disease, and never stop to look at the low-growing, explosive producers right at their feet. Today I am going to show you 20 of them. These are not impressive in theory. These are plants with documented yields that professional market gardeners and serious homesteaders quietly rely on while everyone else is planting orchards. Stick around because number 1 on this list is available as a powder in every health food store for $30. And you could just grow 3 shrubs. And number 20 is so dense, so relentless, so utterly unstoppable that you can harvest it every single week from a space smaller than a doormat, season after season, indefinitely. Number 1. Aronia, the chokeberry that health food companies sell as a $30 powder that might already be growing as an ornamental in your neighborhood with nobody knowing it is edible, and that produces 15 to 30 pounds of berries per mature shrub annually from a plant that thrives in the conditions most other fruit plants refuse to tolerate. Aronia melanocarpa. The supplement industry discovered aronia berries and did what it always does. It repackaged them as a superfood powder and charged a significant markup. The anthocyanin content is among the highest of any berry, which is why aronia became a supplement darling. It is also why 3 established aronia shrubs in your yard make purchasing that powder a decision that requires some explaining. A mature aronia shrub can produce 15 to 30 pounds of berries annually. The shrubs are native to North America, cold-hardy, disease-resistant, drought-tolerant once established, and nearly maintenance-free. They grow in wet soils and heavy clay where most fruit plants fail. They tolerate partial shade. They produce even when neglected. The flavor eaten fresh is intensely astringent. The chokeberry name is honest. But cooked, juiced, dried, or made into preserves, aronia becomes something genuinely exceptional. Aronia got ignored as food because it was planted everywhere as a landscape ornamental, valued for its brilliant red autumn foliage. And nobody told American gardeners that the clusters of dark berries hanging from those gorgeous shrubs were edible, extraordinarily nutritious, and in active demand from the supplement industry at prices that would make any homesteader pay attention. The shrub hiding in your neighbor's front garden is a food production machine. Most people just never thought to look. Number 2 is a plant you may have seen sold in tiny packages at specialty health stores or online for $20 to $40 a pound. It lives for decades. It produces fruit for most of those decades. And it does 2 things simultaneously that almost no other food plant on this list does. It feeds your body as medicine and feeds your family as food at the same time. Number 2. Goji berry. A plant you established once that produces edible, nutritionally extraordinary fruit for up to 20 years, selling dried for $30 to $70 per pound, cold-hardy to -15 Fahrenheit, and used in traditional Chinese medicine for eye health and longevity for over 1,000 years. Lycium barbarum. Plant a goji berry shrub today, and you may be harvesting fruit from it for the rest of your life. The shrubs are cold-hardy, drought-tolerant once established, and begin producing meaningful quantities of fruit in their 2nd or 3rd year. The bright red oblong berries have been a staple of traditional Chinese medicine for centuries, specifically prescribed for eye health and liver support, which is why they have become one of the most commercially successful botanical supplements in the Western world. Dried goji berries sell for $30 to $70 per pound in health food stores. A well-established goji shrub produces several pounds of fresh berries per season, which dry down significantly but represent real commercial value if you choose to sell them, and genuine nutritional value if you eat them daily as traditional medicine recommended. The fresh berries taste mild, slightly sweet, faintly herbal, pleasant in a way that the dried commercial product does not fully capture because drying changes the flavor. Goji plants grow in poor soils, survive neglect, and once established, require essentially no maintenance beyond occasional pruning to keep them manageable. One plant you establish this year that feeds your family and supports your health for the next 20 years is not a garden plant. It is an investment. Number 3. Sea buckthorn, the orange gold of Siberia, producing berries so densely packed along the stems that harvesting them is like stripping beads off a string, containing more vitamin C per teaspoon than multiple oranges, and generating revenue streams from berry juice, seed oil, and skincare-grade extracts from the same compact planting. Hippophae rhamnoids. In Russia, Kazakhstan, and across Central Asia, sea buckthorn is not a specialty crop, it is a staple. Juice made from the intensely tart orange berries is consumed daily as a health tonic. The oil extracted from the seeds and berries commands premium prices in the skincare industry for its extraordinary omega-7 and antioxidant content. The berries themselves grow so densely packed along the stems that the branches bend under the weight of the crop. A productive sea buckthorn shrub in a good fruiting year produces quantities that genuinely surprise first-time growers. The nutritional profile is extraordinary. The vitamin C content of the berries is among the highest of any food plant, significantly exceeding citrus fruit. Compact varieties suited to garden planting are now available that are far more manageable than the sprawling wild plants. You need a male and female for pollination. One male can service several females. And once pollination is established, the females produce reliably year after year. Sea buckthorn got missed in American food culture for the same reason it got missed in medicine. It grows wild in harsh, remote climates, and the commercial infrastructure to make it accessible simply did not exist until recently. The people who figured this out early are quietly harvesting buckets of orange gold every autumn from plants most of their neighbors walk past without a second thought. Number 4. Currants. The fruit that was literally banned by law in America in the early 20th century, whose cultural memory as a food plant essentially vanished from an entire generation of gardeners. And that produces 4 to 10 pounds of extraordinarily nutritious fruit annually from a shrub smaller than most patio furniture. Ribes nigrum and Ribes rubrum. Black currants and red currants are among the most productive small fruit shrubs in existence. They fruit heavily within a few years of planting. They tolerate partial shade better than almost any other fruiting plant. They are disease-resistant, they require almost no maintenance, and they can be planted as a dense, productive hedge that simultaneously produces food and provides structure in the garden. Black currants in particular contain vitamin C at concentrations significantly higher than oranges, alongside a flavor that is intense, complex, and unlike anything available in any grocery store. A single established currant bush produces 4 to 10 pounds of fruit annually from a footprint smaller than most patio chairs. Currants were banned in many American states in the early 1900s because they were suspected of spreading a disease affecting white pine trees. Most of those bans have since been lifted, but the cultural memory of currants as a food plant essentially vanished. An entire generation grew up without knowing this extraordinary plant existed. European gardeners never forgot. British households have been making currant jam, currant cordial, and fresh currant desserts continuously through the entire period when American gardeners were told the plant was illegal. It is the fruit that Prohibition stole from American gardens, and most people do not even know to be angry about it. Number 5. Honeyberries. The Haskap berry that ripens before strawberries, before cherries, before any other fresh fruit in the garden. Cold hardy to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and producing in climates where most other berry plants simply cannot survive. Lonicera caerulea, honeyberries solve a problem you may not have fully articulated. What do you harvest when everything else is still weeks away? In late May, when most of your garden is still waiting, honeyberries are ready. They ripen before strawberries, before cherries, sometimes before any other fresh fruit you can grow in a temperate climate. The cold hardiness is almost difficult to believe. Some varieties tolerate temperatures well below minus 40 degrees, meaning they thrive in climates where blueberries, raspberries, and most other small fruits either struggle or fail entirely. The fruit is oblong, deep blue-purple, with a flavor that combines blueberry and raspberry with something faintly floral. Genuinely distinctive and genuinely delicious. Plant 2 or more varieties for cross-pollination, and your honeyberry shrubs will reward you for decades. The plants are long-lived, low-maintenance, and once established, reliably productive year after year. Honeyberries are essentially unknown in mainstream American gardening because they are a relatively recent introduction from breeding programs working with wild Siberian and Japanese species. The commercial infrastructure has not caught up to how good these plants actually are. The gardeners who got in early are now sitting on some of the most productive early season plantings in their regions, harvesting fresh fruit weeks before any of their neighbors have anything to pick. Number 6. Gooseberries, packing 5 to 10 pounds of fruit onto compact shrubs whose branches at peak production look like they have been decorated for a harvest festival, and representing a fruit that supermarkets could not figure out how to ship, so they simply pretended it did not exist. Ribes uva crispa. At peak production, a well-grown gooseberry bush is one of the most visually remarkable things in a productive garden. The berries hang in clusters along every stem. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of individual fruits on a compact shrub that might occupy 3 square feet of ground. A well-grown gooseberry bush produces 5 to 10 pounds annually. The flavor of a perfectly ripe gooseberry, warm from the sun, soft, bursting with a balance of sweet and tart that intensifies as the berry ripens from sour hard to almost wine soft, is something most people in this country have simply never experienced. European gardeners have always known what they had: gooseberry fool, gooseberry jam, gooseberry crumble. These are not nostalgic recipes. They are the result of centuries of understanding that this shrub, planted once, produces abundantly for decades with minimal care. Gooseberries tolerate heavy clay soils and partial shade better than most fruiting plants. They are cold hardy. They are not particularly prone to pests. Gooseberries disappeared from American consciousness partly because of the same white pine disease panic that hit currants, and partly because supermarkets discovered they could not be commercially packed and shipped without damage. Gooseberries are a garden fruit meant to be eaten where they are grown. That is not a weakness. That is an invitation. Number 7. Strawberries. The plant that produces fruit and simultaneously builds an army of new producers, so that one plant becomes 5, 5 become 25, 25 become 100, without you doing anything at all. Fragaria ex ananassa. A single strawberry plant produces approximately 3 pounds of fruit per season. That is not the impressive part. The impressive part is what it does after that. Strawberries send out runners, long horizontal stems that root themselves wherever they touch the soil and become entirely new, fully productive plants automatically. One plant becomes 5, 5 become 25, 25 become 100. A strawberry planting does not just produce fruit. It produces fruit and more producers simultaneously, compounding its output year after year without any additional investment of seeds, money, or labor. Compare that to a fruit tree. You plant a fruit tree and you wait 3 years, 5 years, sometimes longer before meaningful harvests begin. Meanwhile, your strawberries are fruiting within months of planting and quietly building an army of new plants while they do it. June-bearing varieties give you one enormous flush in early summer, ideal for preserving. Ever-bearing varieties produce smaller flushes throughout the season, better for steady table eating. Strawberries got overlooked as serious food producers because they are so familiar. We think of them as a garden treat, not a food security plant. But when you run the numbers, 3 pounds per plant, automatic propagation, fruit in the first year, indefinite self-renewal, strawberries are one of the most efficient food machines in the plant kingdom. They are the plant that pays you back and then sends its children to pay you back again. Number 8. Blueberries. Requiring the most patience of anything on this list, but rewarding that patience with 10 to 20 pounds of fruit per mature shrub annually from a plant 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide, producing reliably for decades once the soil problem is solved. Vaccinium corymbosum. Blueberries require patience. A mature blueberry bush, and real maturity takes 5 to 7 years, can produce 10 to 20 pounds of fruit per year from a shrub that might be 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Run that against an apple tree that might produce 40 to 60 pounds, but requires a 10-foot canopy radius, and blueberries become extremely efficient per square foot. The catch is soil. Blueberries need acidic conditions, pH 4.5 to 5.5, that most garden soils do not naturally provide. You either amend over time with sulfur or grow them in raised beds or containers with an acidic mix. This is where most people give up. But the gardeners who solve the soil problem are rewarded for decades. Plant at least 2 varieties for cross-pollination. Early, mid, and late varieties extend the harvest window across 6 to 8 weeks of summer. The gardeners who understood they were planting a 20-year investment built blueberry patches that now feed their families every summer on near autopilot. The patience required is not wasted time. It is the down payment on a harvest that compounds silently for the rest of your life. Number 9. Raspberries, growing up instead of out, producing their fruit on tall vertical canes that allow you to extract enormous yields from narrow strips of ground and establishing productive harvests within 18 months while fruit trees are still years from their first significant crop. Rubus idaeus. Raspberries understood something most gardeners have not: grow up, not out. Tall vertical canes mean you can pack them into tight rows, train them on trellises, and extract significant yields from strips of ground that would otherwise be wasted. The biology is elegant. Raspberries produce two types of canes. Primo canes grow in year 1. Floricans fruit in year 2. Understand this cycle and you can manage your planting for continuous production, cutting out spent canes after harvest, while next year's canes are already growing behind them. Summer-bearing and fall-bearing varieties give you flexibility. Grow both and extend your harvest window from midsummer all the way to frost. What makes raspberries exceptional compared to fruit trees is not just yield, it is the speed of establishment. Plant bare root canes in spring, and you can be harvesting meaningful quantities within 18 months. No fruit tree on earth comes close to that timeline. Raspberries got underestimated because the canes are thorny and the 2-year cycle looks complicated at first. But once you understand how they think, management is simple. It is the plant that rewards the 10 minutes you invest in understanding it. Number 10. Blackberries. Almost aggressively productive, rooting wherever their cane tips touch the ground, fruiting heavily even in partial shade where most food plants struggle. And now available in thornless varieties that removed the main objection most people ever had to growing them: Rubus alleganiensis and hybrid varieties. If raspberries are the well-managed member of the cane fruit family, blackberries are the ones who show up and take over the neighborhood. 2 to 3 pounds per plant annually is a conservative estimate. In good conditions with established plants, significantly better is achievable. They root wherever their cane tips touch the ground. They grow in poor soils. They do not demand constant attention, and they fruit heavily even in partial shade where most food plants fail entirely. Modern thornless varieties, Triple Crown, Chester, Arapaho, produce enormous sweet berries on canes that will not shred your arms at harvest time. Here is what makes blackberries a genuine food security plant. They ask almost nothing from you and give back enormously. No complicated spraying schedules, no expensive inputs, no demanding soil requirements. Plant them, give them something to lean on, and get out of their way. Blackberries got avoided in home gardens because wild blackberries are a weed, and people associate the plant with that invasive reputation. But managed thornless varieties with contained root systems are a completely different proposition. They were unfairly judged for their wild cousin's behavior. Quick pause. If this kind of thinking about food production and plant value is something you want to take further, there is a complete, practical system in the first pinned comment below. Which plants to start with, how to maximize your yield from small spaces, and a bonus inside that most people do not expect. Worth a look before you finish. Link is pinned below. Number 11. Cherry tomatoes. And here's the plant I mentioned at the beginning, the one that produces hundreds of individual fruits from a single plant in a single season, from a footprint of roughly 2 square feet, outproducing most dwarf fruit trees in its first summer from seed. Solanum lycopersicum var. Cerasiform. This is where the list shifts into a different gear, from perennial shrubs to the annual and perennial vegetables that demolish fruit trees in productivity per square foot. A single vigorous, indeterminate cherry tomato plant, properly staked, properly fed, in full sun, can produce hundreds of tomatoes over a season, multiple pounds per week at peak production. From one plant occupying roughly 2 square feet of ground, you can harvest fresh fruit from July until frost. The production is so relentless that most gardeners end up with more tomatoes than they know what to do with. Varieties like Sun Gold, Black Cherry, and Sweet Million are near legendary among food gardeners for a reason. Flavor that grocery store tomatoes cannot approach, production that does not quit, and a sweetness that makes them disappear faster than you can pick them. Cultural requirements are significant: full sun, consistent water, good fertility. But meet those requirements and a cherry tomato plant is the closest thing to a fruit tree that grows from seed in 4 months. In the first year, from a pot on your deck. It is the hundreds of fruits machine that fits in a container, and outproduces most orchard trees in its debut season. Number 12. Pole beans, the vertical protein factory that farms airspace instead of ground space, fixes its own nitrogen from the atmosphere while it feeds you, and produces continuously for the entire season as long as you keep harvesting. Phaseolus vulgaris. Pole beans figured out the same thing raspberries did. Grow up. On a trellis 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide, a row of pole beans can supply a family with fresh beans multiple times per week for 3 to 4 months. They grow vertically, meaning you are farming airspace that would otherwise be wasted. They fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, feeding the soil while they feed you. And critically, they produce continuously. Pick pole beans and more beans grow. Stop picking and production slows. The plant's biological mission is to produce seeds. And as long as you keep harvesting before the seeds mature, it keeps producing with remarkable consistency throughout the season. The food value is genuine. Beans provide protein, fiber, and significant nutrition in a way that most fruit does not. When you are thinking about plants that feed a family as a staple rather than a treat, beans belong at the center of the conversation. Pole beans got treated as a humble garden staple, rather than the productivity marvel they actually are. The gardeners who run vertical trellises of pole beans from June to October are quietly harvesting hundreds of dollars of produce from a few square feet of ground that most people would consider a narrow-waisted strip along a fence. Number 13. Cucumbers on a trellis. A fundamentally different proposition from cucumbers sprawling on the ground, producing dozens of fruits per week from a 6-foot footprint during peak season, with the key insight that harvesting young and harvesting often is what keeps the machine running. Cucumis sativus. Vertical trellising solves 3 problems simultaneously. It keeps the fruit clean and straight, it maximizes airflow to reduce disease, and it allows you to grow enormous quantities of cucumbers in a very small footprint. A single trellis of 5 or 6 plants 6 feet tall and 6 feet wide can produce dozens of cucumbers per week during peak season. The key is exactly what works with pole beans. Keep harvesting. The moment you let a cucumber develop to full maturity on the vine, the plant slows down. Harvest young, harvest often, and the plants keep producing with a speed that catches new growers off guard. A cucumber that was a small nub on Monday can be ready to pick by Thursday. Cucumbers are one of the most water-dense foods you can grow. Cooling, hydrating, essentially free once your plants are established during the height of summer, when fresh food matters most. Cucumbers got undervalued as a food production plant because they are seasonal and do not store well fresh. But during the height of summer when production peaks, a trellised cucumber planting produces more food per square foot per week than almost anything else in the garden. A trellis is not a garden accessory. In the hands of a cucumber plant, it is a multiplier. Number 14. Malabar spinach. The tropical vine that produces dense, edible leaves all summer long in the heat that kills real spinach, climbing to 10 feet in a season and supplying a family with fresh greens during the exact weeks when every other green has gone to seed or bolted. Bacella alba. When your spring spinach has bolted, when the summer heat has taken out your lettuce, when the cool season greens have surrendered to the temperature, Malabar spinach is hitting its stride and climbing its trellis. The leaves are thick, slightly succulent, mild in flavor, and work equally well fresh in salads or cooked as you would regular spinach. The vines can reach 8 to 10 feet in a season, producing dense growth absolutely covered in edible leaves. One plant properly supported can supply a family with fresh greens throughout the entire summer heat season. The nutritional profile is strong, high in vitamins A and C, calcium, and iron. This is genuine food production, not just volume. Malabar spinach got overlooked because it is a tropical plant that requires starting indoors in northern climates, and because most seed catalogs did not carry it until relatively recently. But food gardeners who discovered it realized they had found the solution to the summer greens gap. That frustrating period when spring crops are gone and fall crops are not yet ready. It is the plant that keeps feeding you when summer heat has chased every other green out of the garden. Number 15. Sorrel. The perennial you plant once and harvest forever, emerging in early spring before almost anything else in the garden is stirring. Producing its bright lemony leaves year after year from the same root without replanting, and known by almost nobody growing food in this country. Rumex acetosa. Sorrel is the garden equivalent of the investment that keeps paying dividends. Plant it once, it comes back every year forever. It emerges in early spring before most other food plants have begun to stir, sometimes pushing green growth through the last snow. The flavor is bright, intensely lemony, acidic in a way that has made it a staple of French cuisine for centuries and a near-complete unknown in American gardens. The leaves are harvested young and tender, used fresh in salads, wilted into soups, blended into sauces, stirred into eggs. A single sorrel plant in a corner of a raised bed produces harvests for years without replanting, without reseeding, without any particular attention. It simply comes back, every spring, more vigorous than the year before. Sorrel got bypassed in American food gardens partly because it is genuinely unfamiliar. There is no cultural tradition of eating it here, and partly because seed catalogs do not give it the prominent placement it deserves. But the homesteader who plants a row of sorrel this year will still be harvesting from those same plants in 10 years without ever having bought another seed packet. That is the definition of a productive food plant. Number 16. Beets. The genuine 2-for-1 deal that most gardeners either do not know about or do not take full advantage of, providing an edible root that stores through winter and edible greens that are among the best cooking greens in the garden simultaneously from the same planting. Beta vulgaris. Beets provide 2 distinct harvests from one planting. The root, sweet, earthy, nutritious, is the obvious harvest. But the greens that grow above the soil line are some of the best cooking greens available, and most people discard them without a thought. Thin your beet seedlings and eat the thinnings as microgreens. Harvest outer leaves through the season as the roots develop. Pull the roots at maturity and eat those too. The roots store exceptionally well in cool conditions. A root cellar or a refrigerator, extending your homegrown food supply well past the end of the garden season. Beets grow quickly. Many varieties produce harvestable roots in 50 to 60 days. Succession plantings in spring and again in late summer for fall harvest maximize the season. They tolerate light frost and actually improve in flavor after a frost hits them, converting starches to sugars in exactly the way that sweetens parsnips and carrots in cool weather. Beets got underestimated partly because canned beets gave people the wrong impression of the flavor. Fresh roasted beets from the garden are a completely different food. Sweet, complex, nothing like the tinned version. And the greens sautéed with garlic and olive oil are outstanding. 2 crops, 1 planting, 1 seed packet. Number 17. Swiss chard. The backbone of the productive kitchen garden for anyone who understands what it can do, producing continuously from early summer through hard frost, turning the working garden into something that is also genuinely beautiful. Beta vulgaris var. Cichla. A planting of Swiss chard produces continuously from early summer through hard frost, often 3 to 5 months of steady harvesting from a single planting. The cut-and-come-again technique works perfectly. Harvest outer leaves and leave the center growing point intact, and the plant keeps generating new growth. Unlike kale, chard handles summer heat better and tends to look spectacular. The colorful stems of rainbow chard, crimson, gold, white, orange, turn the working garden into something worth looking at, which matters in small spaces where every plant needs to earn its place aesthetically as well as productively. The greens are milder than kale, more versatile, and work in everything from raw salads to sautés to soups to grain bowls. The stems themselves are edible and worth cooking separately. 1 row of Swiss chard can supply a household with the greens multiple times per week for the entire summer and fall. Chard got treated as a secondary vegetable, something you grow if you have extra space, when it should be planted as a primary crop. The gardeners who treat it as an afterthought are leaving months of free nutritious food unharvested. This is the plant that asks so little and gives so much that it is almost embarrassing how consistently it gets underplanted. Number 18. Kale. Not the trendy superfood of recent years, not the overrated health cliché, but the remarkably productive cold-hardy cut-and-come-again food plant that earns its space in the garden every single season. And in mild climates continues producing through winter and resurrects in spring. Brassica oleracea var. Sabelica. Strip away the superfood marketing that made people tired of hearing about kale, and what you have is one of the most productive, cold-hardy, long-season food plants available to the home gardener. A mature kale plant, harvested properly, taking outer leaves and leaving the growing center intact, can produce for months. In mild climates, kale grows through winter. In colder climates, it often survives light freezes and can be harvested until hard frost takes it down in fall, then again in early spring, when it regrows from the root system left in the ground. One planting occupies a small space and delivers consistent greens from early summer through winter, covering nearly the entire growing year. The nutritional density is genuine. Kale is one of the most nutrient-dense foods that can be grown in a temperate climate with lutein and zeaxanthin concentrations that rival any supplement marketed for the same compounds. Kale got dismissed for years as livestock fodder, then overcorrected into a trendy health food, and is now due for a sober reassessment as what it actually is: a remarkably productive, cold-hardy, cut-and-come-again food plant that refuses to quit even when the season tells it to. Number 19. Peas. Producing heavily during the cool season when most of your garden is either dormant or not yet awake, giving you fresh food from the ground while fruit trees are still in blossom and the summer crops have not yet been planted. Pisum sativum. Peas solve a different problem than most plants on this list. They produce in the cool season, spring and fall, when most other food plants are either dormant or not yet producing. A trellis of peas in April and May, when nothing else is ready, is worth more to a food gardener than almost anything else. The yield per square foot is high, the harvest window is consistent, and the flavor of fresh homegrown peas, sweet, crisp, complex, is genuinely different from anything commercially available. Sugar snap peas give you the whole pod, increasing yield per planting. Shelling peas give you high-protein seeds. Snow peas give you tender pods for fresh eating. The limitation is heat. Peas stop producing when summer arrives, but plant them as early as the ground can be worked, trellis them vertically, harvest aggressively to extend the window, and peas give you weeks of heavy, continuous production during the hungry gap of late spring, when most food gardens are still waiting to wake up. Peas got underestimated because they are seen as a cool season crop with limited utility. But paired with fall plantings that take over when spring peas finish, they cover the seasons that every other crop misses. They are the plant that starts producing while your fruit trees are still in blossom. Number 20. Chives. The perennial harvest that never ends. From the plant that never needs replacing, from a space so small it barely qualifies as a garden, emerging every spring before most food plants have stirred and producing, until frost takes them down again. Allium schoenoprasum. Chives are a perennial. You plant them once and they come back every year indefinitely, requiring almost no attention whatsoever. They emerge in early spring before most other food plants have stirred. They keep producing through the entire growing season. Cut them back to an inch above the ground and they regrow within a week. Cut them again. And again. The denser you plant them, the more you can harvest. A foot-wide clump of chives, harvested every 10 days, provides a near-continuous supply of fresh onion flavor for cooking throughout the entire season. Green onions work similarly. Planted thickly in a container or raised bed, they can be harvested by cutting the tops and letting the base regrow, or pulled whole with the recovered bulblets replanted to keep the cycle going perpetually. A 4-inch pot of chives on a kitchen windowsill harvested regularly provides weeks of fresh herb use from essentially no space. A dedicated bed of green onions planted densely and managed for continuous harvest can supply a family's fresh onion needs throughout the growing season from a space smaller than most coffee tables. Chives and green onions got treated as garnish plants. Nice to have, but not serious food. That framing misses the point entirely. In terms of value per square inch of garden space across the full season, they beat almost everything else on this list. They are the harvest that never stops, from the plant that never needs replacing, from a space so small it barely qualifies as a garden. They are the reminder that the most productive plants are not always the biggest ones. They are the ones that keep giving quietly without demanding anything in return. 20 plants. Not one of them requires an orchard. Not one of them demands years of waiting before meaningful production begins. Not one of them asks for acres of land or hundreds of dollars of annual inputs. The most productive food garden is not the biggest one. It is the one planted with the most productive things in the right spaces, managed by someone who understands what each plant is actually capable of. You now know what those plants are. The seeds are available. The space is almost certainly there. What happens next is up to you. For anyone who watched all the way through, the complete practical system for turning plants into real food production and real income from small spaces is in the first pinned comment below, with the bonus included. Use the code FULLVIDEO at checkout for 20% off. The link is pinned whenever you are ready. Hit the like button if this changed how you see a small space. Drop a comment and tell me which plant you're adding first. Subscribe and ring the bell. I will see you in the next one.